Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Evidence, and in today's video I am going to share with you Lambda School Data Science pre-course work and what to expect. So I myself have been through the data science pre-course work from Lambda School, and I just kind of wanted to give you a general overview of what to expect and what it is. So let's dive in. So basically this right here is the data science pre-course work, and as you can see, it's laid out for you in different notebooks and in different sections. So it says welcome and instructions. It's actually very important to read these instructions that they provide. And then next, intro to Python. So as you can see, intro to Python, if you click on, let's say this one for example, it shows you the video that you need to watch. And then once you finish this video at the end, you have an assignment for you to do that corresponds to the video. And of course, this is the same for all of these sections right here. So basically, I'm going to give you a quick overview of each section and what I think of it as somebody who has been through it. So beginning with the first session, I would say the first assignment is the most difficult assignment. And because the first video is supposed to be an introduction to Python, right? And if you've never done coding before, you'll be so confused. After watching the first video and you get to the first assignment, if you've never learned how to code in Python, you'll be really confused. You want to learn much about Python. I want to learn anything really that will help you in the first assignment. Because I feel like the first video is just like a going overview of, oh, this is what Python is, but it doesn't teach you coding really. But then when you go to the first assignment, when you get to the first assignment, then they'll give you coding, and if you've never written a line of code in Python before, you're just like, I have no clue what to do, like coding is not something that comes natural to everyone. You have to learn it. So for the first video on the pre-course work, I highly recommend that you take an online course on Python from, let's say, something like Udacity or Codecademy. These two places are really good. I personally like Codecademy a lot. That's where I learned most of my coding, and that's where I started learning how to code, from Codecademy. So I'm going to leave a link to both of them in the description below. But I'm just warning you up front. If you've never coded in your life before in Python, the first assignment is going to be the most difficult assignment, because the first video doesn't do a good job of teaching you how to code. Yeah. So now you might be wondering, why do we need the pre-course work in the first place? So the way Lambda School works is that you do not pay anything before you start going to school, and when you finish school, then you pay them back 17% of your income for 2 years. So then, but then they have to have a way for them to gauge people, for them to know if people are qualified to go to school at Lambda School. So basically, the pre-course work is a way for them to assess you, assess your knowledge, see your interests, and see if you can finish the pre-course work. So if you can go through the pre-course work, then that increases your chances of getting accepted into Lambda School. So yeah, Lambda School pre-course work is just for you to for them to test you up front and see if you're a good candidate. Now let's move on to the second assignment. So the second assignment, or the second series, is Intro to Jupyter Notebooks and Pandas. So in this section, you have different subsections like learn the role of Jupyter Notebooks, learn to understand the difference between Python modules, packages, and libraries. You learn to import and alias an external Python library. You learn to use pandas to read a CSV file and save it as a data frame. You learn to print the shape and first 5 rows of a data frame to view it. You learn to print the data types of data frame columns. You learn to check for NaN values and remove them from a data set using .fillNA, and learn to create a matplotlib scatter plot using 2 data frame columns. So I really like the second lecture section, and it's pretty good for what it does. Really it is. From this second one I learned a lot of things that I haven't seen before. And yes, and everything they put in the subsection, you actually do learn it. And you do learn how to read a CSV file, and you do learn how to fill NaN, and you do learn everything they described here, which is really good. And then when you get to the assignment, the assignment is related to this. And even though, like, the collab notebook that they use for teaching, the notebook that they use for teaching, they make it available to you, so you can look at the notebook when you're doing assignments. So basically the assignment is not necessarily designed to test you like a test in a classroom where it's closed book. No, you can use the notebook that they use for teaching for your assignments, and they actually encourage it. And most importantly, of course, you can Google stuff. They actually do encourage you to Google stuff. Like, every developer or data scientist, as a matter of fact, need to get into the habit of Googling stuff whenever you don't know it, because that's how we learn most of the time. So yeah, so the second module, the video tutorial for the second module is relevant to the assignment, and it does help you with the assignment, and it does teach you a lot of things. Now let's move on to the third module. The third module is Statistics Fundamentals. So with Statistics Fundamental, you learn what a random variable is and its importance in statistics. You learn the difference between discrete and continuous distributions. You learn the importance of normal distribution and its main features. You learn the role of sampling from a population and its implications. Then you have your assignment. So I really like the statistics module. Like, it introduced me to a lot of things in statistics. So for those of you that don't know, my bachelor's degree is in biochemistry. I know. My bachelor's degree is in biochemistry. And when I was in college, I didn't take any statistics class. I mean, I took calculus, and it was easy for me. Like, math was easy for me in college. But I didn't explore that further, because calculus was the only requirement for me to get my bachelor's degree in biochemistry. And so I didn't explore any math classes further. So what they teach here in Statistics Fundamentals is actually my first real exposure to statistics, and they did a really good job of explaining what statistics is, and teaching these things and explaining these things. So after this third section, I learned what random variable is, and I learned what all these things is. And of course, when I got to the assignment, I had to Google some stuff, because it was my first exposure to statistics, and Googling some stuff allowed me to learn it a little bit deeper and get really good at it. So yeah, this third section, Statistics Fundamentals, is really good. If you've never had any exposure to statistics before, it's a good place to start. And then the fourth section is hypothesis testing. So as a biochemist, I'm not really like new to this whole idea of hypothesis testing. I mean, as an undergraduate student, I did a lot of research, and I even have publications, and I have my thesis and all that stuff. So I'm definitely used to the idea of hypothesis testing. But the way they explain hypothesis testing here is a little bit different than I'm used to, but it all comes down to the same idea. Like, they did a good job of explaining it. So in the first section, we have learn the role of hypothesis testing in inferential statistics, learn how to compute the standard deviation of a sample, learn how to calculate the z-score for a normal distribution, learn how to successfully conduct a hypothesis test, and learn how to find a confidence interval of a distribution. And the assignment is hypothesis testing and inferential statistics. So this module right here is actually my first exposure to inferential statistics. And I've known what a standard deviation is, so it wasn't all that new to me. So it was more of a reminder. And I've heard of z-scores when I was in college, but it didn't quite click because I really didn't have a use for it that much. And hypothesis testing and confidence interval of a distribution. Of course, these are the things I'm familiar with, but the way they explained it makes more sense, and it was able to stick in my head a little bit better because I'm already used to this concept, so this is kind of a reminder. And this video also helped me to learn how to process it from a mathematical point of view and a computational point of view, as opposed to a scientific point of view. So the way you do these things from a scientific point of view is a little bit different than how you do it from a mathematical point of view, statistics point of view, and of course computational point of view. And yeah, up next we'll look at the next module, which is linear algebra foundations. So in linear algebra foundations, you have learn basic linear algebra structure, vectors and matrices. Learn to perform basic matrix operations using NumPy, matrix multiplication, inverse, and transpose. And then learn common matrix formats: row matrix, column matrix, square matrix, identity matrix, diagonal matrix, and triangular matrix. For this one, linear algebra foundations, I think everyone needs to pay very close attention to this, because a lot of what they teach here is kind of key to being able to do machine learning kind of work. Like I've heard of vectors and matrices, but I've never had it broken down like this. Like after watching this, I learned how to do addition, multiplication of matrices, how to graph them, how to take two vectors and bring them into a matrix, how to do a lot of matrix manipulations. Like I learned so much from this right here. I'm like, why don't they teach this stuff in college? I'm sure they do teach this in college, but the way they teach it in college is like more difficult, and they make it like unnecessarily difficult, and they use symbols that doesn't make sense. But here they were able to teach it in a simple format, and the way they were able to teach it here, and they also used code, and they were able to show you examples and break everything down step by step. So I suggest that you really pay attention to this module. And also they show you how to use NumPy. This is my first exposure to NumPy, and I kind of like it. And they do a really good job of explaining what vectors and matrices is and how to calculate them by hand. You will learn how to compute vectors and matrices by hand, but at the same time you also learn how to do this with code. So when you come to the assignment, there's a section where you have to do computation by hand. You have to do your computations by hand. And then there's a section where you have to do the exact same computations by code. And basically the code version just clarifies or like supports the answers that you got by computing it by hand. And computing it by hand is really the only way for you to actually learn it and understand the concept. It's true that as a data scientist, most times you'll be doing these calculations by computer, but it's very important for you to actually understand what's happening and how to compute things by hand. And computing it by hand kind of makes it sink in, make you really learn it and understand it, and make it easier for you to like wrap your head around what you're actually coding. And next is linear algebra applications. Under linear algebra applications, you will learn how to represent equations in matrix form. You learn to solve equations simultaneously using matrix algebra. You learn to compute the least squares solution of a linear regression. And then of course you have your assignment. So basically the linear algebra applications is a continuation of linear algebra foundations. So linear algebra foundations, you just learn the foundations and kind of understand what's happening. And in linear algebra applications, they will show you how to apply vectors and matrices in the real world. Like they will it's basically what it sounds like. It's an application of the theory and concept of linear algebra that you learned the previous video, the previous lesson. So yeah, it's really good. Like you learn a lot. By the time you finish going through the pre-coursework of data science, like you learn a whole lot about data science and the foundations of it. Let's keep going. And the next one is called Data Science Admission Challenge Part 1. And under this, you learn how to train a model with sklearn. You learn to make predictions on a test data set, and then you have your assignment. So basically, this part is actually really good. And the way the data science pre-coursework is that everything builds on top of each other. So basically, when you learn how to train a model with sklearn, you'll be drawing from concepts and things you've learned throughout the previous lessons and throughout the previous videos. And scikit-learn is really good, and this is my first exposure to it, and so I was able to pick it up super easily. So I really like it. And then finally you have the Data Science Admission Challenge Part 2, and this is video lesson number 8, I believe. And in this module you will learn to improve upon baseline model to obtain a high level of model accuracy. You learn how to perform basic feature engineering tasks, and you learn at a high level the types of supervised learning models. So basically, Data Science Admission Challenge Part 2 again builds on everything you've been learning prior to this time. And basically it will when you get to the it will kind of help you start making sense of what data science really is. And when you get to the data science admission, when you get to the assignment portion of it, it's more like open-ended. This is kind of like a place where you can use your creativity a little bit, and it's less guided, because the other assignments, they will guide you and ask individual questions of, you learn this, and this is, they give you an assignment, they give you a question and they expect an answer. But when you get to the last assignment, it's more like one question, and then you're supposed to like kind of come up with your own answer or come up with your own further questions to ask. So the last one for the last assignment is really exciting, you know, because when you get there, you're like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do this, or you're like, oh, this is what I need to get done, and because this is what I need to get done, like you're like, oh, I need to do this first, do this first, do this first. So basically you pull information, you pull knowledge from everything you've been learning prior to this time, and you feel kind of very proud of yourself, you know, when you get to the end of assignment 8. So basically, yeah, that's it. I wanted to give you a quick rundown of Lambda and data science pre-course work. So if you're considering joining Lambda School Data Science cohort, you have an idea of what to expect. You know you have to do the pre-course work, and basically this is what the pre-course work look like. And I think the pre-course work is really good, and I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot from it. And I haven't got my admission decision yet, so yeah, if I do get accepted into the Lambda School pre-course work, I'm really going to enjoy it. And even if I do not get accepted for whatever reason, I learned a lot throughout this process. Just through these 8 videos, I learned a whole lot. So yeah, that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. And I'll see you next time. Bye.